On July 7th, 2021, the Montreal Canadiens were 3 games away from winning their first Stanley Cup since 1993. However, they would lose Game 5 with a final score of 1-0. And where this story takes an absurd turn is the fact that the Montreal Canadiens would set an NHL record, as they are the only team in league history to make it to the Stanley Cup Finals, where they would then be the first team mathematically eliminated the next season. And considering that this year, the Canadiens are at the bottom of the standings, the question is, how in the tabernacle can a team make the Stanley Cup Final 3 games away from a cup to a complete and utter roster implosion? But to be honest, is that a bad thing? In a previous video, I looked into the past 5 Stanley Cup champions and the Canucks, where I would analyze their rosters. Were they A, drafted by their team, homegrown talent, or B, signed to an entry-level deal through free agency? And I also think it's relevant to include prospects who were traded for and developed in their system. Vegas drafted Nick Suzuki, but Montreal was the team who developed him into the star he is today, so he too would count as one. Tampa Bay had 15, Colorado at 11, St. Louis and Washington at 14, Vancouver at a nice 6. And as for Montreal, this season, they have had 16 players who have suited up on their team. 16, ladies and gentlemen, relative to past champions. The Montreal Canadiens rank first. Nice. Not bad. It cannot be emphasized enough. Championship rosters are constructed through the draft, not free agency, not through trades. Chemistry can be better developed with the nice benefit in that homegrown talents tend to take hometown discounts. Not always, but most of the time, which is why many teams have been signing young players to absurdly long contracts. Look at the Dylan Cousins contract. People thought Jack Hughes was overpaid, or even the Nick Suzuki deal. Teams have developed a new strategy where they are willing to give a semi-unproven player a massive contract, betting that they will end up developing into studs, which at that point, their contracts will look like steals. Leon Draisaitl is the epitome of this strategy, and it is going to be fascinating to see if some of these massive contracts end up completely backfiring. With that being said, what is Montreal's drafting track record? After working his way up in the Blackhawks system, Bergevin would get his big break, as he would become the 17th general manager of the Montreal Canadiens. And being that Bergevin was a part of the scouting team that drafted Jonathan Toews, Patrick Kane, Philip Deneau, pieces that led Chicago to become arguably a dynasty. Bergevin landing in Montreal had huge potential, and he's French. Bonus points. And here are the first round picks Bergevin made during his time with the Canadiens. And here are the players who are on their roster today, okay? And here are the players who got criminally charged in their draft year.
Lifelong Habs fan, I have to say, I am deeply disappointed by the decision.
Only in Canada does the leader of the country have to address a draft pick. Like, what? And honestly, it's not pretty. Cole Caulfield at 15 was a home run. Kaden Guhle is developing nicely on the blue line. But to hit 2 players throughout the last 10 first-round picks is concerning. On this graphic, we have every draft selection made by Montreal when Marc Bergevin was GM, okay? And here are all the draft picks who are on their roster today. Since 2012, 8 drafted players have played for the Montreal Canadiens this season, which is not great. Not to mention, aside from Cole Caulfield, obvious star power is lacking. Yes, you can develop and draft a bunch of depth guys. That's important too. But it's also more important to draft those hidden gems. Think Brayden Point. And what's absurd about this visual is that the Montreal Canadiens have more 7th round picks on their roster than 1st round picks. I don't even know how that's possible, but there it is. And here are the players who aren't playing on Montreal this season. 11 players. So they have traded away more of their drafted and developed players than they have kept, with the biggest one being Mikhail Sergachev. Okay, Marc Bergevin might have spent too much time in the gym and not enough time in scouting meetings. However, I will say, he did make up for some of his blunders through trades. On this graphic, we have significant trades Bergevin made. Trading Max Pacioretty for Nick Suzuki is the perfect example of trading a player at the perfect time. The Philip Deneau trade was a slam dunk, as they traded away, and get this, Thomas Fleischmann and Dale Weiss, two veterans, for Philip Deneau and a second-round pick they used to select Alex Romanov. And being that they would flip Romanov in a series of deals that landed them Kirby Dach, they started with two declining veterans and ended up with Deneau and Kirby Dach. This is like a masterclass in trading up, like starting with a pencil and ending up with a house. Now, the Kirby Dach trade was not made by the Burger Man because in November of 2021, regardless, and I can't believe this, no matter how much muscles he gained, ownership, they just didn't care. They weren't impressed. And the Burger Van and his 0.5% body fat would be fired. And to be honest, Bergevin didn't do a bad job. Not a good job, but somewhere in the middle. Trading PK Subban for Shea Weber was a crazy blockbuster trade, but it ended up being very beneficial, as Shea Weber's leadership was a big reason why they made it to the Cup Finals. Because after making the right decision in the 2016 NHL draft, Sergachev could have been a cornerstone defenseman, but he would be shockingly traded to Tampa for Jonathan Drouin, which in hindsight was a horrendous deal. Sergachev is 24, showing Norris potential, whereas Drouin has been a massive disappointment. He has been dealing with injury and mental health issues, so all the best to that guy. He was one of the most skilled prospects I have ever seen. But it gets worse. Much worse. Because in August of 2021, my God, we would see it. The Carolina Hurricanes would offer sheet Jesperi Kotkaniemi. And keep in mind, back in 2018, Marc Bergevin would also do the unthinkable, as he would basically announce to the league before the draft that he was going to go off the board and select Jesperi Kotkaniemi number 3, which to be honest was one of the weirdest plays I've ever seen. Why tell everyone in the league your plan? Maybe trade down? I don't know. As Brady Tkachuk and Quinn Hughes would be selected right after Kotkaniemi, as Jesperi would struggle during his time with the Habs. He had some great glimpses, but being that he wasn't progressing as they hoped, it was a tough decision, as the Hurricanes offer sheet was worth $6.1 million, which means that Montreal could either match the Hurricanes offer sheet or let him go, where Montreal would then receive a first and third round pick in compensation, and the Montreal Canadiens would decide not to match. Seems like a pretty convoluted way to just do a trade. I don't know. And what is absurd about this situation is the fact that the Carolina Hurricanes did this out of spite, because Marc Bergevin would offer sheet Sebastian Aho 2 years prior. It was a shit show of petty GMs, because this is where it gets messy. Montreal getting back a first and third isn't horrible. However, they would end up flipping that first and second for Dvorak. And this trade did not make any sense to me. Dvorak isn't a bad player, don't get me wrong, but if your team is rebuilding, why send away a precious first and second round pick for a middle six center? And it makes even less sense when you consider that the Burgerman and the Habs would make a weird decision in not re-signing Philip Deneau, who was their reliable shutdown center, as he would leave in free agency and join the Kings. Why not just keep the picks, re-sign Deneau, and continue to rebuild with more draft capital? I don't get it, and I don't think ownership did either, because this was the last trade Bergevin would make before getting canned. Ken Hughes would be hired, and even though he's only been in office for just over a year now, this man has been on fire, because during his first draft as GM, he would select Yuri Slafkovsky, who is a 6'3", 240-pound power center who has franchise upside. However, in the second round, it would happen.
Lane Hudson.
The Canadiens would draft Lane Hudson, who may just end up being the best player from this draft. Because get this, Lane Hudson this season is on track to surpass Adam Fox, Quinn Hughes, Cale Makar, this man in points as a freshman defenseman. Will he be as good? No, I'm not saying that. But if anyone drafts, steals a player like Lane Hudson in the second round, who could end up being a star caliber defenseman, ladies and gentlemen, that is how you win cups. And this is where Montreal's secret plan comes into action, because this past month, the news would break. Cole Caulfield would be shut down for the rest of the season, as he would need shoulder surgery. But here's the thing, Cole Caulfield has been reportedly playing with this injury the entire season. So how is this a secret plan? Cole Caulfield reportedly did not want to get shut down. And can you blame him? The guy was breaking out and on pace for 40 goals. With that being said, Montreal made the right decision. Shut him down, figure out his shoulder situation, where he can then return at 100%. And when you remove Caulfield out of the lineup, you are gonna lose more games. Your Bedard odds go up. And I also want to emphasize, a player like Cole Caulfield is a reason why so many people buy tickets, jerseys, hockey cards. Like, are you kidding me? Watching games on their TVs. Cole Caulfield single-handedly generates the Canadiens tens of millions of dollars. And so by taking him out when it wasn't 100% necessary, ownership has accepted that they will lose millions in revenue. And it's obvious that Montreal is focused on development, building a team that can win, which starts through the draft. So I respect that they'd rather prioritize Caulfield's health, as it also means losing more games and higher Bedard odds. And maybe it's because Montreal is one of the richest teams in the league, so they're in a position where losing millions of dollars in revenue doesn't cut as deep. But I can promise you this, many owners around the league, I'm looking at you, Francesco, would rather their star played not at 100% if it meant they would lose millions of dollars from their pockets if they took him out. Because not only will they have a top pick in this draft, which is being compared to the 2015 NHL draft, where every other player in the first round has developed into a star, but they also have Florida's first round pick from the Ben Sherrod trade. And Florida might not even make the playoffs. Marc Bergevin made many draft mistakes, so it is a great sign that Kent Hughes has already made some incredible picks. Kent Hughes has only been in charge for just over a year. So what about Kent Hughes' trades? On this graphic, we have the players they traded away and received. And my God, do I have to give credit where credit is due? Because in just 1 year of trades, Kent Hughes has one of the best trade records I have ever seen, as they traded away veterans for young players, first round picks. I mean, they used the second round pick from the Brett Kulak trade to Edmonton and used it to draft Wayne Hudson. Beautiful. This is just beautiful. And what I love about the Nick Suzuki Kirby Dach trade, yes, they gave up major pieces to acquire them, but in return, they got young star caliber players who have shown they can be franchise pieces, which is, in my opinion, the perfect way to rebuild. Because instead of drafting Frank Nazar at pick number 13 last year, but instead, they would flip that pick for Kirby Dach, who's still young and has great upside. Frank Nazar may be a great player, but he might need another 5 years to be an impact player. And the truth is, Montreal is building something scary, as they already have franchise building blocks, fan favorites, and the potential to draft several more superstars in the upcoming future. If McDavid and the Oilers can't do it, and Kent Hughes continues this asset management masterclass, they might just be the next Canadian team to hoist the cup. So how does Montreal have more drafted and/or developed roster players when compared to the last 5 Stanley Cup champions? Even though their drafting has been poor, they have made up for it by knowing when to cut ties with veterans and by following a new strategy made popular by Tampa. That is, if you acquire a blue chip prospect who has a good development track record, this basically puts you in a position where you are basically expediting the rebuild process. But what's different about Montreal compared to Tampa? Have they acquired key building block players? They also have the draft capital to start building a great team from top to bottom. And I would really appreciate it if you sub to the channel. I've been doing this whole YouTube thing since I was like 10 years old. It's been a long journey, and I can't believe that we are on the road to 100K. Crazy. I appreciate all the support so much, guys. You've really changed my life. And as always, thanks for watching.